the mystery of it continues, which is part in due to the relationships that have developed from this with the family, a lot of it to do with this book out in the world and the conversations that are coming from that. I didn't know how many people needed to hear that it's okay to be unfixed. I thought it was the message that I really needed, and it started to resonate with me. But I think the world is ready to let their sails down and just meet life as it is. We've been fed so much messaging around how to improve and self-actualize, and all of the growth is, I'm not dismissing that, but I think it's just been very out of balance with the meeting life as it is.
Welcome to DNA Surprises, a podcast that explores the life-altering world of unexpected DNA discoveries. I'm your host, Alexis Auersalt. This show centers the stories of people who've experienced NPEs, or non-paternal events. In other words, people who've learned that their biological father isn't who they thought he was. We'll also hear from adoptees, donor-conceived people, and the families navigating these discoveries. Get ready to follow the incredible journeys that begin with a simple DNA test. This is DNA Surprises. Hosting DNA Surprises gives me the incredible opportunity to speak to incredible people every week. And almost everyone I speak to says something along the lines of, I've been told to write a book. It's true. Our stories are stranger than fiction. In this week's episode, I'm joined by someone who wrote that book. Kimberly Warner, author of Unfixed, a memoir of family, mystery, and the currents that carry you home. Her story details her perfect from the outside but far from it on the inside family, loss, illness, relationships, careers, and more. But as we discuss, it's anchored on the revelation that the man who raised her is not her biological father. I really enjoyed this conversation and hope you do too. Thank you for sharing your story, Kimberly. Today, I am joined by Kimberly Warner, author of the incredible memoir, Unfixed, a memoir of family, mystery, and the currents that carry you home. Thank you so much for joining me, Kimberly.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here, Alexis. Finally.
Yes, finally. We've been trying to make this interview happen for a while, and now we're sitting down getting to talk about it. I just finished the memoir and really enjoyed it. Thank you for telling your story so generously and vulnerably.
Well, I needed to tell it. I don't know if, I don't think this was even in the preface, but I wrote this for myself. I truly decided in 2018 that I needed to get this down on paper because so much had happened, so much had changed. My identity was completely just in disarray. And so for me, it was about reclaiming parts of myself and a kind of reckoning and a survival strategy. So all of that was really, really necessary. Didn't think it would ever be published and put into the world.
Well, I'm so glad that it was. Obviously, if you're listening to this podcast, you can probably guess that one of the major themes of Kimberly's book is a DNA surprise. So before we jump in and start talking more deeply about the book, I'd love if you could share with the listeners kind of an overview of what happened. What was your DNA surprise?
Gosh, yes. And it's a long story. So I'm going to try to abbreviate it here. As with all of us, we have, there's so many layers to these stories. When I was 17, I was told that my father might not be my father, but it was told in a very casual, pedestrian kind of way on a walk with my mother. And I was a teenager. I was self-absorbed in my own life. I was very, very close to my dad. And it really was like presented to me as a 1% possibility. So I dismissed it. So much so that I forgot about it, never talked to my dad about it, never talked to friends about it. It was gone, done. My dad that raised me died 6 months later, and that only further buried this conversation. So it was not part of me. Fast forward when I turned 40. And in this interim, my mom would sometimes bring up that story, this one night fling with a man in the Mariposa Music Festival in Canada. And, she would talk about Charlie, but it was just Charlie and this fun little thing. So there was nothing more to it except a family joke at that point. However, when I turned 40, I had a very severe bicycle accident. I had a long period of bed rest. And in that same week that the bicycle accident happened, my mother, about a month prior, remembered his last name. And this, again, was on a random walk. We happened to be in Mexico at that time. And never in my life had she said, Charles Brower. She had only ever said the first name and mentioned a few details. So this was enough for me. Here this man keeps coming up. I better just do a little Google search now. I put Charles Brower. I knew that he had a television show on public television. I knew that he was a musician. Enough details. Up pops an image that shatters something inside of me. Even when I looked at it, I saw it, and I was on the plane ride home from that trip in Mexico, and I already was starting to tremble inside. I pulled the image up without any context and shared it with my husband when he picked me up at the airport, and I said, "Who does that look like?" And he just sort of laughed, and he said, I don't know, but it could be your dad." And that was another piece for me to kind of digest. Bicycle accident happened, lots of time in bed rest to digest even more. Finally, my brother gifted me a DNA kit, and I took the DNA test and found out that he was my half brother. So, of course, there's, a lot more to the story. And of course, people are thinking, well, what about other men? How did you know, it was him? But I won't reveal all of that right now. But yes, that was sort of how it began. And my life just crumbled at that point.
And I will say, even as I'm listening to you tell this, I'm like, oh, and then this happened, and this, thinking more about all of the details and the circumstances and the way you talk about your dad dying so soon after that. And I really just felt like I was there with you, and throughout so much of the memoir as well. So thank you for sharing that. And we won't go too deep into spoilers during this conversation for sure, but I do have questions about the book. Maybe just starting with the title, Unfixed. I think that term, while it's not anything I think I had used to describe, I think I'd used untethered, unmoored, but unfixed also really resonates. What does that word mean to you?
For me, the original term came from one of the elements that came from the discovery of this DNA test and the unraveling, which included the unraveling of my own neurology. So I ended up developing a neurological disorder that comes from heightened states of panic. So when I say I unraveled, I went into some protracted panic attacks, and so much, it destabilized my nervous system so much so that my brain started misinterpreting solid ground as liquid. It's called mal-de-débarquement syndrome, and it's something that I live with now 24/7. But for the first, I want to say, I always forget, but it was like 6 years before I even had a diagnosis, I was chasing, trying to fix it. I had no room in my entire being for living with this. This was not something I could live with. And so much so that I felt like I did need to die if this was going to stay with me. It was so tormenting. I went from being a tomboy to doing everything and running a film company and all of that to not being able to walk across the street without clutching my husband's hand. And so I'm very much isolated. And so the word fixed was driving this compulsion, and then became a conversation that my husband and I had around what would it be like if you were not fixed? What if you were unfixed? So it started there. and my exploration of a whole community of humans that live with chronic illness and mental illness and things that we cannot control and cannot fix. But it's become so much more of a philosophy now, which is not something that is exclusive to the unfixed community of chronic illness. It's something we all live with. It's grief, it's uncertainty, it's inefficiency, it's not knowing, it's all of the things that we want to, with our new age self-help books, we want to control. And I had to, by necessity, learn to find another way of transformation that wasn't through curing. It was a transformation through surrender.
Oh, that's such a good way of describing it. Mm-hmm. We don't have to be fixed.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to be fixed. I like unfixed.
Yeah, exactly.
We're not broken. We're unfixed.
Yeah. And even, we think about like our fixed ideas, and it has so many different layers of meaning, but I love also that it can be part of the fluidity of how we navigate the world with our belief systems. And my own sense of self has changed through the discovery of this DNA test and through the living with the neurological disorder. So even my identity is unfixed.
Absolutely. Well, this is actually maybe a good segue for the first excerpt that I'd love for you to read. It's this idea of, from the outside, many people probably and did assume that you had this perfect family and this perfect life. Your father was a doctor, 2 kids, like it just all looked idyllic. But you and your family struggled with many different things, but you personally write about struggling with OCD, anxiety, and this feeling of discomfort within your own body. And as I mentioned when we were talking earlier, it reminded me of Kerry Washington's book. And she was a late discovery donor conceived person. So she had her own DNA surprise in her life. And she also had these just not feeling comfortable with herself and not really knowing what was wrong. And you talked about this mystery illness that you've had. So, there's also that piece that's an undercurrent throughout. But I was really struck by that feeling that a lot of us seem to have, that just feeling like something's wrong, not necessarily attributing it really to anything with our families, but it's almost like there's something wrong with us.
Yes.
So I would love if you could read an excerpt from chapter 7 that really captures that.
I'm so there with you, Alexis. It's like what Danny Shapiro calls the unknown known, and our body knows when our mind doesn't. And so this manifests in unusual ways. I ground myself with routine, structure, and predictability. Mom is thoughtful about our activities, maintaining our calendar, even through the more tumultuous stretches of her marriage. She may need the predictability as much as I do. Holiday rituals, meal rituals, Kim Robertson's calming heart music in the morning rituals. The structure soothes my nervous system, but the confidence with which it's executed sedates me. I fall in line. Who am I to question these 3 gorgeous, intelligent, successful humans and the way they move so assuredly through the world? I don't have the language or the confidence to explore my own unmasked, unanswered questions. Ask me if something is wrong and I feel A, guilty, feeling like shit when I have so much privilege, B, confused by the disconnect between how I feel and how I am perceived, or C, grumpy and embarrassed when you notice that I feel like shit, and D, sad when you don't notice that I feel like shit. And this is when I take it out on myself, on my skin. I spend hundreds of hours hidden in the bathroom, punishing myself, excavating anxiety one pore at a time. Blood and sebum surface like proof. I don't understand the source of my unease, so I create one instead. The root of my anxiety must be my skin. Why would I think otherwise? There is nothing in the outward-facing architecture of my life that explains why I feel like an outsider, so lonely, so deeply insecure. So I latch onto the one thing I can see. If only these pimples go away, then I'll be happy again.
How many discounts does USAA Auto Insurance offer? Too many to say here. Multi-vehicle discount, safe driver discount, new vehicle discount, storage discount, legacy.
How many discounts will you stack up? Tap the banner or visit USAA.com/auto discounts. Restrictions apply.
Picture this. Me, Reese Witherspoon, in London, ordering fish and chips so often they might start wrapping me in paper. I'm traveling with my Wells Fargo Autograph Journey card, so I earn rewards wherever I book travel. 5 times points with hotels, 4 times with airlines, 3 times on restaurants and other travel, and 1 point on other purchases. Imagine getting rewarded for eating a toad in the hole. Wait, what is a toad in a hole?
Visit wellsfargo.com/autograph journey. Terms apply.
Do you think, and it's hard, right, to look back because hindsight is 2020, but were you aware at that time that you felt like you didn't fit in with your family and that was why you were doing what you were doing? Or is it more upon reflection you go, aha, that created some anxiety? Was that lack of belonging?
I think it's hindsight is 2020 for me. I definitely knew that I felt anxious, but I had no clue where to put it. And so I fixated, it was my skin. I decided that's what made me feel so anxious. And then when that cleared up, I turned it into something else and then into something else. So without the context of the paternity issue, I really didn't have ground to stand on. So I had to fabricate what that was. And I think also that there is sort of, the inflammatory nature of anxiety and of not feeling like you belong, that can biologically live in our bodies as inflammation. It's like a heat, a fire. It's something that can't be released. And so in a way, I was trying to surface it. I was trying to find it. And over and over and over again, as you know in the book, I was trying to find it, but it just didn't have anywhere to land because there was no story. There was no narrative that could hold it.
I love the way that you described that and what you said about your anxiety moving from thing to thing to thing. I have described that so many times in therapy. Actually, my husband is the one who pointed it out to me. It took me that long to realize that that's what I was doing, where he was like, do you notice that, it might start out with our kitchen's really messy and I need to reorganize everything. And then once that's done, there's some other problem that needs to be solved. Mm-hmm. This was before my DNA surprise as well.
Wow. So, I wonder if that's a pattern for a lot of us, because without the narrative to hold that tension, it needs a place to go.
It does. Mm-hmm. Again, we're not going to go deep into spoilers, but you do end up discovering Charlie and learning more about him, and you're not able to meet him. But one of the things that you do throughout the book is write these letters. And I think many people do the practice of writing letters to ourselves, to our mothers, to our fathers, to try to process. But something that I thought was really interesting is that you wrote to him not from present day. You wrote to him from the perspective of your younger self in these various moments. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about why you did that and what that did for you as you processed your DNA surprise?
Yeah, that was a really playful, fun way for me to get to know him and know myself in relationship to him through all the chapters of my life that didn't get to sit on his lap while he was playing his guitar, or go for walks with him in the woods, or cry in his arm, fantasies. These are fantasies. I don't know if these would have happened. So much of what I discovered when I discovered Charlie eventually was a part of myself that had been hidden. And not just, like what my nose looked like, but my creativity. I dropped out of medical school and pursued film. And Charlie, I learned, was a poet, a musician, a filmmaker. He was involved in so many different facets of what I had been restlessly kind of confused by, because I came from a very self-help, new agey, natural medicine and all of that. So my left turn towards all these things that felt so true to me were also very confusing. So when I finally learned about Charlie and his family and this whole creative universe that they embodied, it was like something, like little lights went on in my DNA. It felt like almost as if oh, I can finally come to life. And so one of the things I did was I would take his poetry and answer the poems as if we were doing like a call and response. And then that led into these writing letters to him that felt like it was not just communicating with him in my imagination, but also letting that part of myself that was still very infantile come to life. Because through that relationship, through that imaginary conversation, it was as if I was starting to acknowledge that those other parts of me existed. So it really kind of was a little bit like a generative process of bringing all those hidden parts of myself to the surface.
Oh, I love that. Something we've talked about, and I've hosted retreats and we've had sessions on parts work. And I think that is such an interesting exercise to just think about putting yourself in that place and writing. Thank you for talking about it, because I thought that was like an interesting sort of writing exercise that maybe listeners would want to try, or I may try that myself.
I highly encourage it. And I see photos of my biological father when he was young. We're identical. And I can see my little bratty, snotty face in his bratty, snotty, and it's like, oh, I want to have a conversation from that little girl who was trying to understand the world and talk, like, how did he navigate that? And it's very satisfying, because I really do believe our ancestors live in us. They die, but they live in us in so many different ways. And so we have these opportunities to kind of bring them to life again.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you talked about finding out about Charlie, maybe not all the details, but just the idea that he was a possibility when you were 17 in 1992. And that was before consumer DNA tests and the internet were prominent. How do you think that this impacted your story? Something I'm really fascinated by when I talk to other people who've had DNA surprises is this waiting game and how long it takes for these stories to play out.
Well, I remember somewhere around, like, when I had my first computer, Google was still something that was not used a lot, but I was like, oh, I'm able to use this search engine. And I remember putting that name in again, Charlie. And there was, like I said, there was no last name, but I knew a little bit about like this TV show and whatever. And it just always it brought up this German musician from like 1922 or something. But it did feel sometimes like I was in this divination process with the computer, like something in me kept me coming back but there was nothing ever emerged. So it was just dead. I still had a lot of anxiety, and I was still demonstrating a lot of behaviors that were manifestations of this anxiety. And I had a lot of health problems. When I was 21, I developed Graves' disease, which is an autoimmune thyroid disorder. And I even remember reading somewhere that type of disorder with the thyroid is a manifestation of grief. Whether or not that's true, this was just a few years after my dad had died. So I spent 2 decades of my adult life very much floundering and dabbling and clinging to doctors, really chasing a fix for my thyroid, and then my gut, and then whatever. It was always something. So I felt like I was, I don't want to say I wasted my life, because all of this led to this incredible story that I live now, that I feel so have so much agency and empowerment in. But I was lost. I felt very, very, very lost for those 20 years. Pursuit of my career kept changing. My relationships with my mother and my brother were, all over the place. My relationships with men were all over the place. I look back and I feel sad for that girl. I really wish I could have held her and told her that the feelings that she was having inside were true, and that they had a place and they had a narrative that they could land in, and that she didn't need to blame herself for feeling so strange. I just felt so lost and so strange in this world, like I didn't belong. And I really wish I could go back and tell her that she did belong, and that soon she would know. She would know.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe you weren't even aware of how patient you were being because you didn't know what was in front of you. But it's just an incredibly long time to wait, to get those answers.
Yeah. And it's hard on our bodies. I mean, I keep coming back to our body, but I really do think these truths live in our bodies. And maybe there's been a poll, but I would guess that a lot of us that live through these stories, especially with that long duration, we end up with some kind of chronic disorder where there's that schism between the known and the unknown. And the manifestation of that unknown just keeps kind of come to the surface. And
Something else that you mentioned, I'd say it's a theme, is magical thinking.
Oh, yeah.
Which I love. But I think sometimes people can be dismissive, right, of that concept of finding meaning in things. And I noticed, it gave you such a strong sense of connection and feeling tethered to your dad, to Charlie. Mm-hmm. Can you talk more about the role of magical thinking and what that played in your journey and why it was important to call those moments out in the memoir?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, it's interesting. I had a book club discussion the other night, and someone asked me, my mom said, "Isn't it wonderful that you belong to the mystery?" That was the tagline when she said, "You might have a different father," when I was 17. And even though I question, whether she thinks I said it and I think she said it and who knows what the truth was, but I can still acknowledge that their mystery was a big part of this whole story. And whether I like it or not, whether the teenager self would likes it or not, in a large way, I do belong to the mystery because this whole mystery has been unfolding in so many mysterious ways. That includes the magical thinking that has both sides. There's a light side to it and there's a shadow side to it. The light side is that I'm a Pisces, so it helps me sort of navigate this world and the next. And for me, when I was not willing to be in relationship to myself as I needed to believe in these conversations I was having with my dad after he died. And that if I just have, the universe promise me these things or deliver these human beings into my path and then follow them, if I didn't believe that those were some sort of larger order or larger connection to or wisdom, then I think I would have felt really, really, really untethered. And I was already untethered. So it kind of gave me a little bit of a North Star. That said, the dark side of it is that it prevented me from being in relationship to myself as I was. Magical thinking by its very nature, and the same with fixing even, is that it's something out there. It's something in the future. It's something that tells us that maybe something's better over here than meeting ourselves where we are. And that was, like I said in the beginning, the surrendering to what was where my greatest transformation was. It wasn't through the magical thinking and believing that I could have all of these things that I wanted in the future.
Yeah. I think when we're sort of powerless over how our stories unfold, it gives you that sense of, well, I'm going to make meaning of this. And it gives you that ownership and power. Yeah.
And it helps us find the love in chaos.
Yeah.
I mean, there are so many, I've heard that so many times, Alexis, where someone will end up connecting with another person or connecting with a place. And then it turns out they were related, or they had a connection to that person that was part of our DNA. My husband's name is David. That was my father that raised me. Of course, I knew that. His middle name is Charles. Like, you can't make that stuff up.
No, you can't.
I didn't start dating him when I knew that I had another dad.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So does make me think that there are unseen forces. I don't want to claim to know the truth. I don't want to claim to say just because I can't see it doesn't mean it's there. This part of our stories is quite mysterious and magical. And I do have to think that there is a lot more at play than we can see. And that gives me, if nothing else, it gives me a sense of agency and beauty within the chaos.
Absolutely. Well put.
I had that dream again. My small business needs to hire, but I don't use LinkedIn, and I hire wrong. So then I'm doing IT, and when I go to plug the servers in, they become sentient, and they won't let us access our network unless we forward their chain emails and memes to more and more and more people, and then I wake up.
Don't let hiring nightmares ruin your dreams. LinkedIn Jobs' new AI assistant finds and invites best fit candidates to apply, so you can discover talent you may have missed. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/quality. Start hiring today with LinkedIn.
You touched on it, right? Your mom introduced some of the mystery, and isn't that, what was the line?
Your father might not be your father, but isn't it more interesting that you belong to the mystery?
Belonging to the mystery, yes. So clearly your mother, I think it just is such an interesting character, for lack of a better word, in the memoir. And obviously, like, in addition to the role that our raised fathers and our biological fathers play in DNA Surprises, our relationships with our mothers are a huge piece of this. And I was really struck by the passage you wrote about a pivotal moment in your story when you're staying with your mother. Can you read that excerpt from chapter 34?
I would love to. And this is important for me too, because I was also just speaking with someone that read the book, and they said one of the themes that I found is that you were always looking for the love. And it's funny because I don't think I consciously set out to write this book saying, I'm going to look for the love in all these situations. But I'm so glad that came through, because this could have been a story about blame and judgment and resentment and abandonment and all of those things. And for me, I knew in the writing, because I was writing it for myself, I was looking for healing. And the healing was going to happen through acknowledging that we're all human and finding the love in all of their foibles and all of their, all their whole life. We all have stuff that we're going to be messing up and messing with other people's lives through those messes. I never planned for them to happen, erupting without warning. My adult self can't rationalize away the child's fury. You were supposed to protect me, she screams. Not back in the movie theater, but 40 years ago when I first shaped the word dad. I asked her to tell the Charlie story over and over again, trying to understand her choice to stay in the dark. I explode again. We hug. I explode again. We cry. I explode again. We talk through it. This thawing business is a slushy mess. Mom's shadow gobbler is fat and her brain's emotional dial is getting a workout. And then I hear it. Soft but differentiating consonants free our tangled branches. Tiny shoots push down, down, down from my feet. Her beautiful glassy eyes are inches from mine, vulnerable but certain. I'm so sorry, Kim. I'm so sorry I didn't protect you. and that I didn't pursue the truth. I was so focused on keeping everything together. I was afraid to find out the truth and risk everything falling apart. I hear sorry, I hear pursue truth, but it's the everyday you, incarnate and valid, that fortifies and repairs. The snow globe shatters. I no longer identify as an accessory to her story. I am not the neat epilogue to her choices. I am an individual with my own needs, my own desires, my own failures. Someone who was protected from the truth, not protected by the truth. Someone who didn't get to decide her own story because it was edited and tidied up before she was even born. And now I get to. We hold each other. I feel no blame, only deep, undying love for the woman now and also the woman then who did her very best to protect me from hurt, only to discover 40 years later that the truth can hurt, but it also can heal. It does hurt. It does heal.
I just love this excerpt. It so beautifully captures, I think, the empathy that a lot of people have for their moms. I think, like you said, there can be this anger, this blame, and sometimes I think it depends, right, on the mother's reaction in these situations. But personally, this really resonated with me. A lot of people struggle with their moms. How did you get to this point of just deep, undying love and releasing of the blame and anger?
A lot of it I attribute to her. My husband and I both watched her at her young, she's 81 years old now. So this was 70, 81 years. I say young, but old. She could have very much frozen her reaction, which at the beginning was, who are you going to tell? And why do you need to share this? She never dismissed why it was affecting me so much like some friends did, but she definitely was a little concerned about how much I was going to share it. And we watched her over 11 years very much transform her relationship to this story to the point where she could look in my eyes and just with undying pride and love and say, I'm so proud of you. I'm just so proud of you. And also, I think part of it maybe came when I wrote the story, because she read the manuscript before I ever, like I said, I wasn't planning on sharing it with the world. It sat on a hard drive for 3 years before I shared it with anybody. And then I pulled it out and shared that manuscript with my mom. And I think she felt represented well. I think she felt my love in the story and that I wasn't trying to blame. So had I not written the story, she might not have known how much reverence and respect I was holding for her in this process, which might just be, a form of really good communication. I don't think I probably could have communicated all that's in this book with her over a dinner. So I think she felt very respected and held. And for me, the neurological disorder that like I mentioned earlier, we got so bad that I ended up moving in with her. I flew to Colorado and I just didn't plan on staying there for 7 months. I was just pursuing other healers there, but I ended up staying for 7 months. And I think her seeing me really fall apart and in a very, very desperate place, the mother in her rose up and wanted to protect and saw that the mess was what we both needed to hold. Instead of the neat, tidy story with putting a bow on it, we both got to hold the mess together. We both wanted to fix it, and I was pursuing all kinds of healers there, but nothing worked. And so we were alchemizing the pain together. I remember so many times I would just put my head in her lap and she would hold her hands on my head and we would cry and we would cry and we would cry. So it was a 7-month journey that I think was part of the alchemizing of the love that was emerging from this.
That's beautiful. That's incredible. And unfortunately, I don't think a lot of people get that opportunity, right? So it was so wonderful to read that somebody got to have that experience and the power that had. You've touched on some of these things, right? Your condition, the various health challenges that you've had. You've experienced a lot of interesting life, good and bad, you might say, right? Different careers, relationships growing up, your parents, their marriage. And yet this memoir really is anchored on your DNA surprise and this revelation. And I'd love for you to talk about why that is. Maybe because, to the point that you mentioned, where maybe some of your friends didn't understand why it was such a big moment in your life, a big event in your life. I think it would be interesting to hear you explain why, even though you've had this very full life, this really was the anchor in your memoir.
I love how you say that. This is the anchor to the story. You're so right. And I can say it very simply. It's because I finally came home to myself when I knew. It's as if the inner and the outer finally merged. All of the feelings, all the anxiousness, the sicknesses, let's call that the underworld, and then all the presentations of who I thought I was to be, the career, the identity, the relationships. It's like they never could come home to one another. And finding out who my dad was, thus finding out who I was, it's like the two, if you could visualize, it's like the underworld and the outer world just collided and they joined for the first time. And I have felt nothing but grace since then. And grace within the adversity and this strange neurological stuff. I'm dizzy right now, but I feel solid and calm in a way that I have never, ever experienced. I feel stillness even within all of the movement. It's as if something just finally, the schism was healed. I mean, that's why the tagline, even in my book, the currents that carry you home.
Yes.
Yes. I do think that there are so many ways that these stories heal us, and they might not have the outcome that we want. I know I'm very, very fortunate with the way that my outcome was in the sense of the family, and even though there's tragedy within that, but I think just the very nature of coming home to who we are is very powerful, especially when it's lived in us, but it's unknown. It's felt in us, but it doesn't have a place to land.
The book is now out in the world. Congratulations.
Thank you.
But obviously, as the title says, your feelings, your life, it's unfixed. Mm-hmm. So how would you say that you're doing today with your DNA surprise?
Oh, I feel so much gratitude. I feel like it continues to the mystery of it continues, which is part in due to the relationships that have developed from this with the family, a lot of it to do with this book out in the world and the conversations that are coming from that. I didn't know how many people needed to hear that it's okay to be unfixed. I thought it was the message that I really needed, and it started to resonate with me. But I think the world is ready to let their sails down and just meet life as it is. We've been fed so much messaging around how to improve and self-actualize, and all of the growth I'm not dismissing that, but I think it's just been very out of balance with the meeting life as it is. So I feel very dizzy. I had a horrible migraine yesterday, and I am happier than I've ever been. And I'm also very much just kind of like going for the ride. I never planned for this book was not supposed to be shared with the world, and it's happening. And so I'm like, well, what's next? I'm surrendered to kind of experiencing what lands in my lap and unfolding and engaging with that. And I really don't know where it's going to take me, because this book was not in my design, not on my bucket list.
If you don't mind, I have 2 more questions for you. The first question is simply, what advice do you have for parents who may be keeping a DNA surprise from their child?
Oh, my goodness. I know it's painful, and I know it's scary that this could blow everything up. But your child deserves to know. Your child deserves to know. And it's not necessarily that it's going to be a big deal for them. You let them have their own reaction. It might not be anything. It might be life-changing. But I think that there is more to... I want to acknowledge the value of our intelligence of our bodies. And I think when our bodies sense that something's not quite right, it manifests in other ways. And so even if it's just for the health of that individual, their physical, emotional, mental health, they need to know, because that will be some kind of coming home and healing for them.
And what advice do you have for someone who just uncovered a DNA surprise?
Go slow. This is my advice in reaction to how I did not do it. I take it slowly, digest. Don't be too eager to share with the world right away. Maybe find one person you can confide in, but let the pace, I'm coming back to the body again, let the pace of your body guide you. I became so manic and panicked with the information that I started telling the story to everyone and anyone, and it only exaggerated the panic in me. And it was as if I was trying to find a place for it to land. But where it should have been landing was in my body. And that pace was a lot slower than the pace of where my mind needed it to go to resolve, because that's what I was trying to do when I was telling the story to everybody on the bus and in the plane. And it's like I was trying to land it somewhere.
Yeah.
So I would say take it slow. Do lots of writing with yourself, and ask how it wants to be shared, if it even wants to be shared. And let that be your guide.
Great advice. Kimberly, thank you so much for joining me today. If people want to pick up Unfixed, where can they find it?
Everywhere. You can find it. You can go on Barnes & Noble online, Amazon, Bookshop. Some of the indie stores around the country are starting to stock it. It's going to depend on, our current political climate and all of that, but you can definitely find it online.
Amazing. Thank you again. I really appreciated this conversation.
Oh, Alexis, this is just incredible. What an honor.
Thanks again to Kimberly Warner for joining me. If you'd like to pick up a copy of Unfixed, I've linked it in the show notes. And if you have a DNA surprise that you'd like to share, please submit your story at dnasurprises.com. For early, ad-free access to episodes, join me over on Patreon at patreon.com/DNA Surprises. Until next time. DNA Surprises is hosted, produced, and edited by me, Alexis Auersalt. It is mixed and mastered by Josh Auersalt of Siren Recording Studios.